festive times and celebrations are so overwhelming in terms of our sensory processing. They demand us to engage our sensory integration skills on every level. So often we're tolerating new textures, we're tolerating new experiences, we might be tolerating lots of visuals, lots of flashing lights on and off. We might be tolerating a change in our environment. We might be tolerating different foods and flavours and tastes and how they're even presented. You know, are they touching each other when normally they wouldn't be? So, you know, thinking in terms of our sensory integration system at a festive time is something that's really worth spending a bit of time on, and just kind of visiting where our children's sensory sensitivities lie, how their sensory processing system works, and how they integrate with their environment and with the demands of the day and those changes around festivities with their senses, and how we can support them and help that in maintaining a good level. So we want them to enjoy the experience, and we do want senses to be in play. And for some of our children, these are the very best times, because we tend to think of those hyper-sensory experiences where we're trying to constantly lessen that experience and de-intensify it. But actually, for some children with our neurodiverse profiles, stimulating and whipping up those sensory experiences is the very best thing for them. So don't think of everything as a negative thing and we need to make it less. For some situations, it may be actually a great opportunity for exposing our children to more and the things that they really love. I know one family that kind of thought everything needed to be very low key, and after Christmas they actually put up all the lights that they'd use for their Christmas celebration in the little boy's calm tent that they had in his bedroom, because actually they realised that that stimulation was the very thing he needed to help him to feel calmer. So just thinking in terms of our own individual child's sensory responses and reactions. So if we think in terms of the kind of regularly thought of senses, so we've got what we see, what we hear, what we taste, what we touch, what we experience. So we've got those kind of commonly understood senses, but at Christmas time, there's other senses that come into play that it's really helpful to be mindful of. And one of those senses is our proprioception sense, where that's what helps us to kind of navigate ourselves around the room without bumping into things and falling over things. A sense I'm not very good at. I'm queen at clumsiness. So it might be that when we move things around in our house, that we're just very mindful of where things are going to be. You know, don't have the Christmas tree where it's likely to get bumped into and knocked over. And, you know, don't have decorations hanging that are likely to trip us up. So thinking in terms of how we navigate around some of those festive decorations and extra bits and pieces that we perhaps bring into our home. It may even be that we've got a family gathering for an occasion and we need to move the furniture and put the table out differently. So thinking about doing that well in advance so that our children have got chance to navigate that and get their proprioception skills into play so that they're actually really kind of conscious of where everything is and not constantly falling into it. So thinking about that particular sense as well. And then also thinking in terms of our interoception senses, so that like internalizing and understanding our body signals, especially for some families when there's constant food around. If you've got a child who internally doesn't really regulate or know when they're full or when they've had enough to eat, then actually it can be problematic if we've got tubs of sweets and nuts and crisps and things constantly around. So thinking about how that works for your child as well. Them understanding if they're hot or cold, and then perhaps trying to understand the reaction to that if they're wearing particular clothing for this occasion. I know recently at a family celebration, you know, the very idea of having to keep a jacket on was a real challenge for a teenager. So, you know, thinking about those internalized senses as well, and how we can relate that. And then also thinking in terms of sharing how we're feeling and what's going on. That kind of alexithymia for some of our children is really challenging as well. So trying to just read the occasion and be aware of how they might respond in a certain situation, and creating some familiarity. And I've just got an example here of, you know, sometimes the best learned lessons are through the mistakes we make. And I bought this really rather nice homemade Christmas tree decoration at a craft fair, and it's a soap smelly one, and I thought, oh, this will be great for in our sensory box, which we take everywhere with us. But actually this in the sensory box made everything else smell of this particular soap, and it did not go down well, let me tell you. So sometimes our you know, best intentions, our best laid plans need to be more carefully thought out. And thinking, you know, it's a good analogy really, thinking about what impact, if I expose my child to this, will this have on him and the rest, or her and the rest of what's going on. So yes, take our sensory activities with us and use them, but just be mindful of what the other kind of ripple effect might be. I know one family that their little boy had a scarf that he used to wrap around him when he just wanted a moment on his own or needed some peace, and he used that scarf, and so they thought, oh, it'd be nice to make a themed scarf. So they made a scarf which had a Christmas material on for that particular family. That was their celebration, and so that themed scarf went instead of his usual scarf, and that went down about as well as the scented soap. So just being mindful of maintaining some familiarity to help with our sensory integration system, and taking along the things that are familiar. Familiarity, as Gary Mezibov, the big guru in the field of autism, talks about, familiarity is your friend. And certainly during these less familiar festive times, familiarity absolutely is your friend.